Hi, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for some PB&J holiday inspiration. And today I will be making a card using our slapstick cling stamp Peaceful Moment. And I love working with Penny Black's Scenic stamps such as this. Using a stamp positioning tool, you can get a beautiful multicolored impression and inked background, all one layer, and it's very easy to do and to replicate. So if you're making multiple cards, you can also really replicate this easily. So here's a list just real quick of all the supplies I've used in creating this card, and I will put this list back up at the very end of the video. So if you just watch on screen here at the very end of the video, I'll have that for you again, and you can just pause it if you need to check it out in detail. So as I said, I'm going to be working in my stamp positioning tool, and I'm using the Misty by My Sweet Petunia, and I'm going to begin by inking up the entire stamp using Antique Linen Distress ink. And I just wanted to use a very light ink, so this will be the part of the image that is the very lightest at the very end. So some of those branches where they almost look frosty on the finished card, this is the little bit of antique linen color that we'll be showing. Now I did wipe off some of that from the bottom right hand corner because I didn't want that to have any brown or antique linen color to it. I want that to look like a snowbank at the end. And I'm just doing a couple of impressions. It looks like I'm really pushing hard. I don't know why it looks like that when I take these videos, but you don't have to push that hard. You can do it multiple times just to darken up the impression. It's also handy to do this so that you can get a really good look at what you're working on. So you can just look right over to the right and see where the fence posts are and where the trees are. And it just makes it easier when you go to color directly onto the stamp. So I'm starting here working on just the edge or sort of the shadow of the snowbank. And I'm going to be using Tombow dual brush pens to color directly onto my stamp. You can use any type of markers that you like to color onto your stamp with, such as distress markers or these type of markers. I find that I prefer the Tombow dual brush pens for this technique just because I like their really rich, vibrant colors. Now once I stamp that, I'm going to go in here and just try and blend that out a little bit using some water on my paintbrush. I'll also, on just an acrylic block here, color with that marker and pick it up with the paintbrush and some water and paint a little bit on, sort of pouncing my brush. I didn't want it to look like just a flat, straight line, and I will show you some other ways to sort of fix that up as we get further into the video. And I'm just going to keep going back and forth. Now when I do my blending with the water, which I'll do in some other places too, I'm not adding too much water. I'm working on Neenah Solar White cardstock, and it's a very smooth, thick cardstock, but it is not a watercolor paper. So you don't want to add too much water. It really will start to sort of pill up on you. Now I went ahead and cleaned my whole stamp, and then I'm patting it dry with a paper towel. I want to be sure that it's dry. And I'm going to start adding color to the rest of the image. So I'm working next on the fence, and I'm coloring that with a gray, and I'm just working in small sections so that the ink doesn't dry before I go to stamp it. And I'm just going to keep going back and forth and inking that up. And then I'm going to go in again with that paintbrush and just very little water and just blend it out ever so slightly. You will notice different colors blend more and less even within the same medium. So even with these same markers, some are going to blend more, some are going to blend less, but just to smooth it out a little bit. When you color onto a stamp with a marker, just because of the nature of applying the ink with a brush type motion onto the stamp, you're going to see some brush strokes when you go to stamp it. So this just helps to sort of even that out. Now because I didn't add too much water, I don't need to dry that before I go back in and add some shading. So I'm just going in with a darker gray and adding it in a few places on the fence. And then I'll stamp that down. And all of the exact colors of each marker are listed on that supply list at the very end of the video. And I'm blending that out now with the paintbrush. And next I'm going to work on the tree trunks and branches. So I'm using a dark brown. Now when I color with that marker, I'm using the brush tip and I kind of turn it to the side so I can easily and quickly apply the ink to the stamp. I'm making sure to color the entire trunk and some of the thicker branches up at the top, but I'm not trying to color onto them all. Now I will do more than one impression to darken the color and also just make sure that I get a pretty good solid impression. And it helps me see where I want to add some more. Like up here at the top, I wanted to extend some of those darker branches up into the top. I'm not trying to cover everything though, and you will see at the end where you really want to leave some of those light areas that were stamped with the antique linen at the very beginning, because that's going to give you that frosty effect when we add our inks on top. So I just keep going back and forth. And now I'm going to do some blending with the paintbrush. And this is another step where you don't have to be too worried about blending it perfectly, or if a little bit bleeds out. It just adds to the painterly effect of the finished product. And because I'm hardly using any water, it really doesn't bleed too much or blend that significantly. Now once again, I'm just seeing a few places here where I wanted to add a little bit more darkness up into those branches for contrast, so I'm going back in and stamping that. And I just keep kind of looking at it, stepping back when I'm not doing anything there. I'm just kind of looking at it and thinking about where I want to add more. Now I'm going to color the bird red. Stamp him a couple of times. And I'll blend him. Now that is definitely, that red was the color that did blend very easily, so you don't need much water when you go to blend that. Sometimes reds will bleed on you, so you just want to be careful. And then I'll dry the entire thing, and I've just grabbed a few Prismacolor pencils now that I can go in and add some shading and details on. For me, this is easier than keep trying to go back and forth on the stamp and over to the stamped impression, because I can just look right at it and add them in where I want. Adding a little bit to the bird, and also to the trunks of the trees and a few branches, but mostly to the trunks, just to make sure that they look nice and solid and finished. And this step does not take very much time, but I did find that it made a really big difference in feeling like the finished impression looked really polished and done. And down here on the snow, I'm just keep fiddling with that. I'm going to color with a darker color and sort of blend it out here with the lighter color at the bottom. I wanted to get it a little bit closer to the fence. And then I'll do some more blending up there. And I just keep fiddling around with the snow quite a bit. It's one of those things where I could have stopped, but I just kept going. And I think this is a really fun stamp. There's a lot of different ways that you could do that. I think it would be beautiful for a fall card. Incorporate some die-cut leaves down at the base of those trees. If you colored this part where I'm really messing around to make it look like a snowbank, you could color that green or golden browns. It would make a great masculine card if you had a winter birthday or a winter thank you. Now I used a extra fine tip Pitt Artist Pen from Faber-Castell Design Memory Craft to color in the beak and the bird's eye and also his little legs. And I'm just blending out some more of that stamping here using a very light Prismacolor pencil. Just helping things to fade from the blue down into the white in the corner. Now I'm going to completely clean off the entire stamp. And I want to be sure that that's very clean because I'm going to be putting some Versamark ink on that, and I don't want to transfer a bunch of ink onto my ink pad. Patting it dry, getting rid of the fuzz balls. And I'm going to use an anti-static bag onto my entire stamped image. Now that is totally dry. And now comes that Versamark ink that I mentioned. And what I'm going to do here is stamp with Versamark onto the entire stamp. So the whole stamp will be get an impression with the Versamark ink. I will sprinkle that with clear embossing powder and heat to set that. And that is going to set in and seal basically all of that coloring that we've done, whether it was with the distress inks, the markers, the colored pencils. If it's a part of the stamp, then it's going to get sealed in now with this clear embossing powder. And we can go in and add inks to our background, like to the sky, and all of those colors will resist that ink. So I heat that to set, and now I'm going to use Memento inks for my background. You could also use distress inks. You just want to make sure you're not using any permanent inks. You want inks that will work with the resist technique. And you can see that the trees, the bird, the fence, they're all keeping their color that we did before, and that's because they have been clear heat embossed. You also start to get really great contrast, as you can see here, with those branches that we left very light because they're going to resist that ink. So for me, this is really when the magic starts to happen, when you can start adding these inks to the background and you see those beautiful, frosty, intricate branches start to appear. So next I'm using a very light blue. This is called Summer Sky. And I'm just applying these with the Sukaneko ink blending tools with the foam pads. These are the jumbo pads. And then I'll use Bahama Blue. And I like to start with my lighter colors and then add the darker colors on top. And you can even go back in and blend again with the lighter colors if you need to smooth out a transition from one to the next. I start off of the edge and then work my way onto the paper. So here I grab that Summer Sky ink blending tool just to sort of smooth that transition. And then I'm going to add Nautical Blue up in that top corner. And here's another time you can really start to see those light frosty branches start to pop against that background. I just love this technique. Now I did use a paper towel, just a dry paper towel, to wipe off all of those embossed areas, remove any extra ink that might have been sitting there. And now I'm going to add some snow. So I'm using Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus watercolors. This is the titanium white. I'm putting a little bit onto an old acrylic block. I'm going to put a little piece of sticky note to cover up the bird because I didn't want to get a big splash of snow right on the bird. And just with a paintbrush and a little bit of water, I'm just going to go splatter crazy here onto the background. And if I wasn't recording, I'd probably put this in a little box to do this so it wasn't quite as messy. But the good thing is that because this is a watercolor, it just wipes right up with a baby wipe. Now to add a few larger snowflakes in, I'm just using a white gel pen. And I like to do this because it allows me to do the placement myself. So if there's a few spots I want to be sure to get some snow, I can add it in. And I like having some larger splatters and some smaller. So if I didn't get a lot of larger ones, then I can go in and just easily add them in myself. And that finishes off the technique. All I did was add an embossed sentiment strip and a couple of snowflakes with pearls. And here you can get a closer look at those fun branches that are created with this embossing technique using a stamp positioning tool and the Penny Black Scenic stamp. I thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to our channel. You can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram, and on our website and blog. And I've linked to all of those for you down in the YouTube description box below. And stay tuned here because in just a couple of seconds I'll have that supply list up that I promised.